Hello, and welcome. Welcome to this very, very special Libsyn live stream. My name is Brian Coddington, and oh boy, I am so excited to talk about today's live with you. It is all about editing your podcast in Premiere Pro, okay? Adobe Premiere Pro. And it's something that I'm passionate about because obviously I am the video editor and designer here at Libsyn, and I personally have been editing my podcast in Premiere Pro since we went into video at the beginning towards the end of last year. Okay. So I'm excited to talk about with you. It's going to be a blast. I'm looking forward to all of your questions. But like with everything, before we get into the fun stuff, we got to go through our housekeeping, right? Just point of order here. I am currently, it's 95 degrees outside here in Pittsburgh. So I guarantee you over the course of this live, I will probably be sweating. But we're going to get through it together, okay? It's going to be fun. Now, with that said, let's take a look at some of our housekeeping here. First of all, if you are watching us here on YouTube, thanks for doing that. Do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and hit that thumbs up. We here have stuff happening here on the Libsyn YouTube channel all the time. I've got videos on OBS Studio that's going to be coming out really, really soon. We've got videos talking about how to get your interviews together, how to do audio editing, how to do everything related to podcasting. We've got them here right here on the Libsyn YouTube channel. So please do me a favor and subscribe. All right. Now, outside of that, if you want more of these live streams and you want to be the first person to know about these live streams, do me a favor and head over to our Luma page. Okay. The link is in our chat there. So head over to the Luma page and subscribe to this, because this is how you're going to know when we've got new lives coming out. They're posted here regularly. We'll also be, this is where you can literally be the first people to know about what live's happening here. Okay. So go to the Luma page, subscribe to Libsyn so you know what lives are coming up next. And we usually have these, I'd say, about once or twice a month. So we've got plenty of them coming out down the pipe. Now, outside of that, I, of course, have a bonus promo code for you all today. So if you are a podcaster and maybe you're looking to start your podcast and you want to host with Libsyn, because you're here today, do me a favor. You can use the promo code LearnLive right now to get 1 month of free hosting with Libsyn. Just use LearnLive at checkout. You'll get that 1 month free and you can start your podcasting journey. And then on top of that, I know, as with most things that are technical, that there are going to be a ton of questions about this particular topic. We have our crew here from Libsyn in the chat there. They'll be helping us out here, providing links and answering some questions and taking in those questions. But for me to know what questions you want answered, you've got to let me know in the chat. And you can do that by hitting a Q followed by colon in the chat. That is going to let me know and let our team know that you've got a question you want answered. And I'm going to do my absolute best to answer these questions, because I don't want anyone going away saying like, hey, I had this really important question and Brian didn't talk about it. So with that said, what are we actually going to be talking about today? I mentioned Premiere Pro and I mentioned that, but I got to be honest with you. The subject of video comes up all the time. And, a lot of times you get bogged down by you got to get in front of a camera, you got to get lighting, you got to all this stuff. But then it becomes like, well, how do I edit this thing? Right? How do I make it interesting? I came back from Podcast Movement just recently, and it was a great time. A lot of discussion over video. That's pretty much almost what everyone was talking about, was the need for video. And as a video guy, I love hearing that. But, I go back to, well, that's one part of the equation of actually bringing in the video itself. Then you've got to cut it up. Okay. But, it's something that, you can use something like Riverside. You can use something like Descript. But like with all of these tools, you're going to reach a point, just like with audio editing, where you want to do a bit more and you want to use something a bit more professional. And that's honestly why I use Premiere Pro. I've also used DaVinci Resolve. That's a great tool too. But, if you're someone who wants something more professional, maybe just like with audio, you've used Audacity, you find kind of the limits and you're like, I want to do more. That's where learning a nonlinear editor is important. And I really am happy that we're going to be talking about this today. Now, with that said, what are we going to be actually covering? Okay. So, first of all, I believe in working smarter, not harder. Okay. And we could absolutely jump into Premiere right now and just start editing an episode, but I believe that we can build templates in Premiere that make the editing process simple. So I'm going to show you how to create project templates, which will enable you to edit your podcast super, super fast. Okay. We're talking like you'll get them knocked out within maybe an hour or two versus say 3 hours if you're someone who edits something, with video right now. Okay. On top of that, we're going to look at how we can deal with sound in Premiere Pro. Obviously, you can use audio editing tools like Audacity or Audition to do some audio editing tools, but honestly, I think that there's a lot you can do inside of Premiere, and we're going to look at that. We're going to look at how we can actually use Premiere's audio tools, particularly its essential sound panel, to do a lot of the heavy lifting for us. On top of that, we're going to look at how we can edit our show inside of Premiere for YouTube. So if you came to our live last month, the end of last month, we talked about getting your podcast on YouTube, and I am going to go through how to actually edit for YouTube. Knowing what YouTube wants, obviously we talked about things like hooks, things like grabbing the attention within the first 30 seconds. We're going to look at how to edit for YouTube. I'm also going to be talking about how to export your audio and video. Okay, this might seem like a simple subject, but honestly, I've listened to podcasts that are video and audio, and oftentimes the sound is not leveled well enough. I've been in the car sometimes listening to a podcast, and I'll have to crank up the volume in my car just to be able to hear it properly. So now that we're editing inside of Premiere, we could take advantage of some of the leveling tools that are in the export process to help us actually get our levels properly for both YouTube and for our podcast. Okay. And of course, it goes without saying, whenever we're working with video and working with podcasts, we want to create social clips. So I'm going to show you how to quickly create some social clips inside of Premiere using the text editing feature, which allows you to basically edit via text. So if you're familiar with Descript, this is very similar to that particular project, but we're going to go through how to actually edit your social clips really, really fast. All right. Now, with that said, are you ready? Because I'm ready. All right. So we'll move on now to looking at what we're actually been working with. Okay. So I'm going to share my screen here, and we're going to be doing a lot of screen sharing here. So this is currently my desktop. It's truth be told, this is the other screen. This is not the primary screen that we're looking at here, but it's definitely one that is a little less populated by folders and clips of that sort. But it's just going to show our primary folder, which is going to be our video assets. Okay, so let me zoom in here, and we're going to just focus on kind of what's actually in this folder and what we'll be working with. So let's open it up. And inside here, I have two primary folders. Okay, one is going to be my assets folder. Now, this basically contains everything that has to do with my podcast. These are things that are going to always show up in my editing workflow. Okay, for me, I have my theme music. I have a graphic that I've made inside of Adobe After Effects, and this is just kind of a custom one that I've made that has kind of a follow the show with some icons and a little bit of a text to point to my website. So that's kind of what I have there. I also have a third-party graphics. This is pretty cool. If you are someone who doesn't have graphic design skills, or maybe you're not an animator, or maybe you're just, you never played around with this, there are third-party websites that you can get some graphics to spice up your edits, okay? I'm using one from productioncrate.com, which is one of my favorites. Another one that I use often for the Libsyn channel is Envato Elements. Really great site. And you can download these little graphics that have transparency, so you can lay them in, and they look great, okay? So with that said, graphics are very easy to add in by using third parties. But if you have the means and you want to hire out someone, you can look at Fiverr, you can look at other sort of freelancers to kind of build you custom graphics. But honestly, getting started, I think these sites like Production Crate and Envato are fantastic. Now let's jump back to our screen here. I have this is again from Production Crate. That's the subscribe notification the graphic there. I also have a stinger. So this is one that I also pulled from Production Crate, and this is basically a transparency stinger so that I can jump between different sections within my podcast, because again, I want to add visual interest. That's important to me, that I show that visual interest in the video. Now, is this going to reflect in the audio? Not really. Okay, I make the visual interest for the video side. I keep the audio really to the audio side. Okay, now the big question becomes, what am I actually editing? Okay, so this is my file right here. This is an MP4 that I pulled from OBS Studio. Okay, now I've talked about this before, and I talked about this during our last live last month, that, you know, I've been using OBS Studio primarily to record my podcast. And that's again because I want to show you all how this works. Okay, so this is an MP4 that I used in OBS Studio. It is multi-channeled OBS Studio files. So this means that I have all of my audio separated out into different channels. This is something you can set up in OBS so that you're recording everyone separately, which makes it really easy to edit and add in these different processes. You can use something else like Ecamm, or you can use, you know, honestly, any of these sort of recording. Even Riverside will allow you the ability to export out these sort of files so that you can bring into a nonlinear editor like Premiere. But that's honestly what we're going to be playing with today. Okay, now let me jump back to my screen here. Well, my solo shot, right? And with that said, let's jump into Premiere. Now, I mentioned that the first step in this process is to actually create a template. Okay, we're not going to jump straight into editing. Okay, and that is because of the fact that I want to build something that can be repeatable. I want it to be something that I can use this over and over and over again, so I don't have to import stuff. Think about how many times that you, over the course of an edit, import music, import sound effects, import graphics. That time adds up. So we're going to work smarter, not harder, by bringing in and creating a template first. Okay, so let's jump back over to my screen. And to do this, we actually want to create a new project. So in Premiere Pro, I'm going to go click on the new project button. And of course, that is going to bring my screen over to my other screen, which is not what I wanted, but that's okay. We can fix that up here. Okay. So I'm going to create a new project, and I'm just going to call this project just template. Okay. We don't have to make this thing anything crazy. We just want to call it template. I'm going to store on the desktop. And then, honestly, the reason I'm doing this is just because I want to build the template project first. Okay, so we're going to make sure project template is set to none, and then you're just going to make sense in a minute. And we're going to click create. Okay, and it should create our project. There we go. All right, so I have a blank Premiere Pro project right here. Okay, and this is what you're going to start out with. And to create our template, okay, we're basically going to first create a folder structure. Now, in film terms, we call this bins. Okay, I'm going to create some bins that are going to have common elements that are going to show up in every single instance of my edit. Okay, and creating bins are very simple. We just go down here to the new bin button, which looks like a little folder. We're going to click that, and we're going to create our first bin. And my first bin is going to be my episode. Okay, and I'll call it episode sequence. Okay, and this is going to house my actual timeline. When I'm actually editing, it's going to be housed there. We can create sub bins if we want to, but I'm not going to do that for this example. I am going to create a new bin that's just going to be raw video. So that'll be where my raw video is housed. I will create another one for motion graphics, which is where all of my motion graphics are going to be housed. And we'll also create one for audio. Well, actually, no, we'll call this theme music, because the only piece of audio that I'm bringing in is theme music. So I want to have them all housed here. Okay. Finally, I'm going to create one last one, and this is going to be vertical video. Okay. So you can call this social clips if you want. I'm calling it vertical video, but this is the whole point of this, is that we're going to basically build this structure. And the nice thing about the templates are that these structures will be in place every single time that we open this up using this template. Okay. Now that I've got that all set up, let's actually import our files. Okay, remember the files that I had? We're going to import them here. So we can hit Command-I on our keyboard. That's going to open it up, and we'll navigate to my desktop. And you can see right there, it's very messy. You're only seeing part of it. And let's open it up here. And we're just going to bring in, we'll bring in just these files here. So we'll just bring them in like that. So we'll hit import and brought them all in. Now it also created some folders already. So that's one way that you can work. If you have a folder structure already, it will bring that folder structure in. I just did that because I know that everything in that structure is going to be brought in anyways. So let's actually organize this a bit, okay? So I know that my follow the pod graphic, which if I double click on that, you can see that it is just basically a little graphic that pops up there. We're going to take these graphics, we're going to move them into our motion graphics folder, okay? We're also going to take the stinger and move that into the motion graphics folder. We have our audio of our theme music. I'm going to move that to the theme music folder. And then our raw file, we're going to move that into the raw video folder. Well, actually, the raw video folder, I'm going to get rid of this, and you're going to know why in a minute. So I'm going to get rid of the raw video. Okay. And we've got our motion graphics. We got our theme music, raw video. And now that we have those common elements that are always going to be there, okay, let's create some sequences to populate this, okay? I do see the questions coming in, and don't worry, I will get to them. I'm actually marking them right now, so keep having the questions come in. I will get to them probably about towards the end of this live, but keep them coming. So let's actually build some sequences. So let's go to File, New. We'll do Sequence. And in the new sequence, we have a couple options here. So we can do all of this, kind of through these little presets they have. Sometimes I actually like going into the regular settings and doing it custom. That's just me. So I'll click settings and I'll show you kind of what I'm doing primarily. Let me zoom in a bit here. So I'm going to be working with a frame rate of about 30 frames per second. Okay. If you record it at 60, you can make it 60, but 30 frames per second is what, standard YouTube can work with. So I'll keep the time base at 30 frames. I'm going to change the frame rate to 1920 by 1080. Okay. And everything else here is good. Square pixels is good. 30 frames per second time code. This other stuff here, Rec 709, don't worry too much about this. Okay. You could, if you wanted to, actually save this as a preset. Like right down below, you can actually see there's a little save preset button. So if you don't have a preset in the sequence preset section right here, you can create a new one. But we're just going to call this episode. Okay. And we're going to hit OK. Okay. So now in my episode sequence bin, I have a timeline called episode. Let's do the same thing for our vertical. Go to sequence. Well, I should go to File, New, Sequence. And this one I actually can use the presets because there is a social folder in Premiere. And you can see right there, social media portrait, 9:16, 30 frames per second. That is perfect. I'm going to use that. And we'll just call this vertical video. Okay. So we'll throw that in the vertical video folder. Okay. So we've got everything pretty much made. Let's build out our timeline for our episode. Okay. So in the episode here, we'll make sure that we're on the episode timeline here. You can see it highlighted right there. I'm going to start dragging in the elements that I know I'm going to be using. Okay. So I know that, well, actually, let me delete this assets folder there. I know the motion graphics are going to come into play. So let's just drag them in. And let's drag in the subscribe thing there. And let's drag in the stinger. Okay. And if we hover over these, we can see there is our actual stinger. And if it's too big, that's okay. We can go up to effects controls and we can just scale it down a little bit. And I usually click the motion button, which allows you to kind of like move it and position it where you want. Okay. But that's nice there. I'll even go in here and I'll zoom in. I use a little slider here at the bottom to zoom into the timeline a bit. And what I like to do is make it so it pops on screen, sticks for a little bit, and then kind of disappears. Okay, so I want to kind of do that animation in reverse. Here's a neat trick you can do. You can trim it, then you can duplicate it by holding down, I think it's Control on your keyboard, and you can drag out a new instance of it. And then this is really simple. You just right click on it, go up to speed and duration, and change it to reverse speed. And now if we play this back, it'll play, it'll stick around. I think that's too long, so I'm going to just trim this out here until it starts to disappear, which is roughly about right there. So now it pops on screen. Go ahead, follow the podcast, and then it disappears. Okay, so that right there, done. Okay, let's see with the production crate graphic. This one already has it built in, so it's really just a matter of sizing it down. So again, coming up to the effects panel and sizing this down right here so that they're all just kind of on the bottom of the screen, which is what I personally like to do. And then, of course, we have kind of this stinger, which, you know, it's okay if they're just out here. The whole point of putting them on the timeline is that these things are already present in this timeline so that we don't have to re-import these things. So you can do things like add animation, you can add in these kind of duplicates. All the stuff will be saved for the next time we open this template up. All right. Let's also grab in our theme music, and we're just going to drop it in. And actually first going to, because I didn't use this part, use this section right here. So I'm going to trim it by just hitting the little I button here on your keyboard, and that trims it there. And we'll just drag it into the timeline. Okay. The last thing I'm going to do, because for me, I'm going to mute this so I'm not playing that while it's going. The last thing I'm going to do, and this is really cool, is I'm going to add in what are referred to as motion graphic templates, or Mogurts. Okay. Now this is so cool. I'm gonna come to a solo shot right now. Okay. So I talked a little bit before about graphics, okay, and how you can get third-party graphics. A lot of those third-party graphics might actually come in the form of what is called a motion graphic template. Now, these are ones you can make, or you can get them third-party. I'm going to show you one that I made, okay, but this is so cool because if you are someone who, you know, maybe you don't design motion graphics yourself, but, you know, maybe you work with a third party, you want to have something that can be editable without having to go back to the freelancer, right? If you just want to change the name of your host or the name of your guest or just the whatever the call to action is, you want to be able to edit those things inside of Premiere without having to jump to somewhere else. So let me show you the motion graphic templates here. Okay. So back in here, you'll see that off to the side, there are a couple panels here. Right now, you have the essential sound, which is kind of set up by default. But if I click right here, we'll get this, which is the essential graphics panel. Okay. And what's neat about this is that I have some pre-installed templates already here. Okay. Some of them are from third parties. Some of them are ones that I've made. The one that I'm going to show you is one that I've made here, which is, I call it lower third new one. Yes, it's very, very scientific name for a video graphic here. You'll know a lot of film people, a lot of video people will call them either final or new 1-2. Okay, same deal with this. But here's the neat thing about these. All I have to do to bring this graphic in is click and drag it in. Okay, it's going to load up, and then there's my graphic. And this is so cool, because I have right off to the side here all of the parameters that I've already set up in After Effects to edit. Now, obviously, if you're not a motion graphic designer, you're going to see the parameters of whoever designed the motion graphic template. And oftentimes with those third-party sites like Envato, they will have certain parameters there that you can grab. All right. But what's neat about this is that, you know, there's my lower third. I'm just going to call this just host name. And let's call this, you know, whoever this is. So we'll just details. Okay. And I'll change this look of this because I don't like how it looks. So, I'm going to maybe make this, let's move this to the center. And for this one in particular, I put a lot of things in this one. I want the stroke on, but I don't want it to be pink. I want it to be white. So I'm going to change this to be kind of a white stroke. And I'll also play around a bit with where it's actually positioned at. Where is it at here? The alignment's to the left. I'll make it center. And we can change even the stroke width of this. I think I have it down here. Yeah. Also change it where the top alignments. There's a lot of space there. So I'll just put it right there. And I even have a little bit of animation, as you can see. So I could play this back. And it kind of comes from the corner here. I don't want that. I want it to actually be down to up. And then maybe, yeah, centered there. Let's see how that looks. Yeah, it's not bad. I like that. Point is that with these templates, with these Mogurts, you can kind of set that up and then, kind of do the same thing that I did before. But I'm actually not going to change it because I want to make sure that the host name and stuff can be changed on the fly. But the point is I have right now built just a sample timeline, right? That has all of the different things that I can put into an episode. So if you have more things that are always going to show up, the nice thing is this is already just built right for you. Now here comes the fun part, all right? We want to use this over and over again. So I'm going to go up to File, and I'm going to go down to Save. But instead of just saving this, okay, we're going to choose Save as Template, okay? So we're going to click Save as Template, and we're going to call this podcast. We're going to call this Ultimate Podcast Episode, okay? Click Save. And then for good measure, I'll just save this just so I have it. And then we're going to close this out. All right. Now this is the really fun part here. So we're going to just close out this project. All right. And we'll create a new one. So this is actually going to be the episode the actual episode we're going to use. So let's go to new project. We'll call this episode 1. Right. I'll save it on the desktop. But now if we go up to project template, you'll see that we now have Ultimate Project Episode right there. Okay, so this allows me to click it, click Create, and it should bring in everything. Well, it did not. Well, there you go. Let's do that one again there. It might have been because I didn't save it first. Let's save it now. Now we'll go to Save as Template. This is the part about doing it live, folks. Select one. Okay. And close project. New episode. And this time, let's choose this one. And create. Yep, there we go. That was it. Make sure you save first, okay? But doing that now brings in all of my assets. I can reuse these over and over again. The nice thing, too, about templates is that you can share them. Keep in mind when you do share anything, be it projects or templates, you got to have the associated media with it because it will get all disconnected and you don't want to deal with that. All right? So we've got our template done. Now, let's move on to editing. Let's actually bring in our file, okay? So let me go into our raw folder. I will import, bring in our raw file. And it's me, it's my co-host, John. And, the way this was edited, I done already some live editing in OBS. So the way that was done was basically switching using a Stream Deck. So this is a little tip you can use is that if you want to save time on editing, whatever software you're using, be it OBS or Ecamm or vMix, if you can do live editing while you're actually recording your podcast, it will save you a ton of time. Okay, so I've got my raw file. Let's bring this into our new episode. And you can see right there, if I open up, hey, there's all the stuff. Okay, and let's just drop it in. Okay, I want you to see what happens when we drop this in. Okay, so this is what happens when you use a multi-channel file that you've built out of OBS. Okay, and it's that you get all of these little waveforms here. So the way I set mine up was that I have my solo track here. I've got my co-host John, and then I do have a little bit of music that pops in there. And then just to kind of combine everything, one of my channels actually has everything mixed together. Okay, that's how I do it. You don't have to do that, but that's kind of just what's worked out well for me. So because I have all of them separated out, I'm actually going to go and remove this channel. So I'll just hit delete and just drag that up. Oh, don't want to do that. Drag up John there, and we'll delete these other ones here because I don't need those, and just have the music bed also up there. So we've got myself, we've got John, and we've got some audio here. And, we can just kind of scrub through. And let me just mute it just so we can have that there. We're just going to scrub through, and we can see we've got a little bit of a graphic. That, again, built in OBS. Well, not built, but just played out in OBS. So that's, again, something that's just part of the recording. And, we can play through. So let's start with editing. Okay, let's actually start with the editing tools that you're going to use the most. With something like this, really what we're doing is more or less trimming things out. Okay, so I'm going to move my music over here, and we're just going to trim out the parts that I don't really want. Okay, if you've never used Premiere before, you have a couple editing tools that you're going to probably use the most. Okay, one is going to be the selection tool. The nice thing about this one is that we hover over any end of the clip. You can see that we get kind of this little trim slider here. Okay, now right now, if I click and drag, it's going to trim only the video, and that is because my tracks aren't locked together. So whenever you're editing podcast audio and video, you want to make sure that you use link selection by clicking this little icon right here, so that now when I move this, actually let me do that again. There you go. Turn it on. So now if I drag this back, you're going to see it's moving. It's trimming both the audio and video. All right. Now, I know that I probably didn't get started talking. Let's find out when we get started talking here. Quick test. Yeah, it's about right there. So we'll trim this audio back a bit. And we can even do, let's just play this through a bit. Hey, this is a quick test. I'm going to go a little fast with this one just so we're not watching the whole thing through. So if you use keyboard shortcuts at all, use JKL. Podcast here, doing just video here, recording in OBS Studio. And the way I got things set up here is I'm switching between different shots. So this is my solo shot on me, and then we jump to our solo shot of John. There's John. And then we've got this 2-shot right here. And it's all done using String Deck. It's really handy dandy. And we can even do kind of a really cool thing where I bring an opener on right here. So what I typically do is I'll have my opening music. And so that right there, I don't want this part here where it's kind of there's dead air because I did jump to the opener. So we can use another tool to cut this up. And actually, it's the razor tool. Okay. So over here off to the side, we'll click the razor tool, and right around, and I like to use the playhead kind of as a guide here. So maybe like right here, we'll cut that and then jump back and just kind of pull this out so that we're kind of starting right there. Okay. Now we have a little bit of a gap there. And one way you can kind of clean up the gap is by right-clicking on the gap and hitting Ripple Delete. Now, you could, if you want to get real fancy, is use a tool that I think is invaluable for podcast editing, and as the Ripple Edit tool. Okay, so right under here, we've got the Ripple Edit tool. We can select that, and now instead of a red little trim, we get a little yellow trimmy thing, which allows us to select it and trim it back to kind of where we want to start, which is about right there. And if we let go, it automatically does that clip out right there. Okay. So, we can play this out
Cut to me. My audio goes down automatically, and then I'll talk, blah, 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 and then I'll jump to John. John will say something witty and funny.
Zoom in. Okay, I'm going to bring this question up because this is, I think, worth talking about here since we're already talking about this. So Jay brings up, is there a quick way to zoom in and out to the waveform a bit better? There are absolutely ways to do it. You can, I like to kind of zoom in this way using the little sliders at the bottom here, and then the top one to kind of zoom in that way. You could also use keyboard shortcuts as well. If you hit Z, you can zoom in that way. There's a million ways to do anything in Premiere. Like literally they've built it out so that you can, jump from one thing to the other. If you're someone who likes to use your mouse, you can use little sliders here. If you like to use keyboard shortcuts, you can use keyboard shortcuts. But Z, and I believe Option or Alt Z is actually going to allow you to zoom in and out. Okay, so you can see just using that. And then V is actually the keyboard shortcut for the selection tool. Okay, hope that answers your question there. Now, in terms of editing this thing, okay, I do have, kind of this trimmed out a bit, where I want to trim it out at least. So let me actually fix this myself because I don't want to do that. So let me use razor tool again, trim this and trim this back. Okay. So we've got our edit there. And you could rearrange this. And honestly, that's what I'm going to probably do. I want to have the opener at the beginning. So I'll move this. So I'm just grabbing it and dragging it over. Okay. And then I actually don't need these couple tracks here. So we can hit the link selection tool to just select those tracks and then just hit delete. And, we can bring this over. Trim that up there. So now we've got kind of an opener there, right? Again, if we had a graphic already, we could throw that in and have that there. Again, because I've done a live edit of this, I already have some pieces already built together. But this is where it gets to be fun because, we can start laying out our sections. Our graphics can be put right on top of the other track above it, okay? So maybe after the opener, I want to have that lower third that says who I am, okay? So we have the motion graphic template. We can throw that over, and we can then just edit this, okay? So I can say Brian Coddington, and I could say, podcast host, or whatever your call to action is going to be. Now, obviously, I can edit this thing. Again, this is the nice thing about these templates, are that you can always go back in and alter them very easily. Okay. And because I now have this kind of built in, I will duplicate it and kind of do that nice little like reverse animation thing, because might as well make it look fancy, right? And I'll do the speed duration, reverse speed. I like to make it a little bit faster, so like 110. And just trim this out until I see where it starts to disappear. So about right there. Okay. My audio goes down automatically. So there's an opener. There's a little like lower third there. And I'll do the same thing for my co-host. Again, hold down and drag this out. You could also do Command C, Command V to do the same sort of thing. So when John pops up, I want his lower third there. And again, because it's a copy, it's very easy to just adjust. Okay. And we can do that same sort of speed duration magic. All right. So we've got that. And then we could throw in our little graphics. Just have those kind of pop in. You can see that because the way I've built it, it already has a transparency. You could honestly edit it even more if you wanted to by adding in maybe a solid color background or whatever. I'm going to keep it as is just for the sake of time. But again, the nice thing about these templates is that you can always edit them later. If I went back into that template project that I initially created and it made changes, I'll just resave it as a new template and then use that when the next time I edit a podcast episode. Now for this one, I don't think I actually need the stinger, so I'm going to delete that because I don't need it for this one. And then we can move on to talking about some sound stuff. Okay, so how are we on time? We're a little past the time, but that's okay. So let's talk about some sound. So with our sound stuff, we can absolutely go into Audition if I wanted to. And honestly, I would have done that, honestly, at the beginning of this whole video editing journey with my podcast. But I really have been pleasantly surprised by what you can do with the Essential Sound Panel. And that's what I'm going to show you. Okay. Mainly it's because it's clearly not as good as going into a nonlinear editor, but a audio editor, but it's really good for doing very simple things to your audio. If your audio is pretty clean, I really am not of the mind that you have to over process your audio, but to do a little bit of cleanup, to do a little bit of leveling, I think it's worth doing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first select my talking things. And let's just come over to our Essential Sound Panel. And one of the things that Premiere will do is it will automatically find and assign what it thinks your sound is. I'm not always a fan of that, so I'm just going to hit Clear Audio just to show you what this looks like. But this is the Essential Sound Panel. So it's set up to auto tag. I'll take it kind of most of the time, but I have found that depending on like what the audio is, it can sometimes like not find it and give me the wrong audio. So I like to do this just myself. So we can choose dialogue, we can choose music, we can use sound effects, ambience. That's if you have like sound effects, they're supposed to be like wind or stuff. So if you're doing an immersive audio project, you could use that. I'm going to use just dialogue and music for our example. So I've selected both of my talking bits here. I'm going to hit dialogue. And now I get all of the cool things that I can do with this audio. All right. So the first thing I'm going to do, and this is something that I do no matter what. Okay. I'm going to hit the loudness button and hit auto match. Okay. If you ever have had a podcast interview where yourself and your co-host or your guest are talking at different levels and you've tried everything you can to try to level it out, maybe use Levelator, this basically does the exact same thing. It looks at the audio files and it tries to sum it to a common LUF amount. Okay, so if I hit auto match, it's going to analyze it and it's going to automatically adjust the waveform to be at negative, I think it's, negative 23 LUFs. Okay. Now you might be saying, well, Brian, that's not the loudness level that Spotify or Apple Podcasts told me. And you're right, but we're going to fix that upon export. Okay, this is just to, in the project, get everything summed to that level. Okay, so that's taken care of. Let's go to our music, and you can see this one did pull it in perfectly. It chose it as music, and I'm going to hit again the auto match button, which is going to go through, and you can see the waveform just kind of shrunk down a little bit. Okay, it just applied a little bit of adjustment to it, and this set its loudness level to negative 25 LUFs. Okay, so a little bit quieter. That's okay. That's what we want. So that's kind of been done to our audio. All right, let's select our dialogue. And we can do some other things to this. Now, Adobe does have the enhanced speech feature, which I got to tell you, I'm not 100% a fan of. I think it still has some kinks to work out. If you use the Adobe enhanced feature and you love it, please let me know how you're using it, because I'm still finding problems with it. I think it's really good if you have like really bad audio to begin with, but if you're recording with a nice mic like I am, you might not find a lot of use from it. Some processes I do use sometimes are the de-esser. If you've got a mic like a Rode Pod mic, it is pretty harsh, so you can turn that on. And I like to dial these things down really low. I don't want a lot of processing on this. You also can do things like reduce noise. Be mindful, though, that this is not a true noise reduction like you would see inside of Audition. This is a very simple effect that's done inside of this project, but it's good enough, honestly. And I think that's the way you got to think about this is that, yes, you can spend a lot of time in Audition. Yes, you can spend a lot of time in Reaper or Hindenburg, but this is designed to get it very down and dirty and out the door, right? And if you're recording really good audio to begin with, you might not need to do a whole ton of processing. Okay. Outside of that, we have dynamics. So this is basically a compressor that we can turn on. We also have EQ, and the EQ is pretty fun. So you can use this as an EQ. I'm actually going to only select my audio for this one and choose that as an EQ and choose a preset. So we can choose, podcast voice. And again, just like with the de-esser, I really like to turn these down a ton. I don't like to add a lot of processing to this because, once you start adding a lot of processing, you can get a lot of artifacts. Okay. So for this, I'll turn this on and we can just take a quick listen to see how this sounds. Different shot. So this is my solo shot on me. And then we jump to our solo shot of John. Okay. And let's just listen to it with that. And you're probably not going to notice too much of a thing there, but we can just disable the EQ and the de-esser for a moment on me, and then we jump to our solo shot of John. There's John. So I mean, this is something that I noticed a little bit of a difference, but the average audience member is probably not. Okay, so if the podcast voice is just going to add a little bit of boost in the bass level, and the de-esser is going to just clamp down a little bit of the harsh tones. And, the pod mic gives a lot of harsh tones, in my opinion. Great mic, but just one thing. Now, for my co-host, John, I'm actually going to do something different. Okay. I'm going to use the audio track mixer, which is kind of the old-fashioned way of doing some audio EQing. Now, the audio track mixer, for you audio nuts out there, is going to look really familiar. So right at the top, we can see that John is on track 2, which is A2 right here. You can, of course, go in and you can name it something different. But just like with any sort of audio plugin, you can add in all sorts of things. And, I saw one person ask, can you add VST plugins? Yes, you can. If they're loaded up and they're visible inside of Audition, you can pretty much find them here. Not all of them are here, but a good chunk of them are. So, for John, I'm going to apply just a regular parametric equalizer. Double click that. And this is quite literally the exact same EQ that you get inside of Audition. Okay, so if you use Audition and you like working with Audition, you like working with those plugins, you can bring them in Premiere. And as long as they're on, say, a single track, you can add these in. Okay, so I'm just going to add a little bit of roll off on his low end. I'll boost it a slight bit because his microphone always is a little tinny. And we'll do a little bit of a mid cut, just to add a bit of presence in the high end. Okay. Now, yes, I'm not listening to this, but I know his voice so well because we've done, 322 episodes together that I kind of know what works well for him. So, my audio goes down automatically, and then I'll talk. And John's going to say peanuts because I asked him.
He's not going
to.
Peanuts.
So that's his audio there. We know it's working. And, that's another way of being able to add in some EQ there. Now, let me bring up this question because this leads into the next bit here. Okay. And this is all about, is there an auto duck built in for mixing music under dialogue? That's not under dialogue. It is actually for the music track itself. So if we click on our music track and we scroll down, we can see that there is a ducking option right here. Okay. So if we select that, we have a couple options here for sensitivity, which is how sensitive is this ducking going to be based off of our dialogue. We can choose it to be kind of narrow or kind of high. We can also choose what the duck amount is going to be. So if you were like, hey, you know what, I want it to duck, but I don't want it to duck a ton, right? We still want to have that background music present. You can adjust that here. You can also change the fade duration, how long you want that fade to be. and the fade position. Now, I'm just going to hit generate keyframes. I don't know what it's going to give me. And there we go. We can see, let's zoom in a bit right here and drag this up. And you can see that we automatically now have, let me get rid of this. None of y'all can see that. So you can see that now we've got these little keyframes that were automatically generated. That's a neat little thing there. Okay. So yes, auto ducking is in this. It works, I'd say, about 90% of the time. There are often times that I go in and manually add ducking, but that's just me. Okay. Now, moving along. For finding the hook in your podcast, honestly, the way I like to work this is, maybe this section right here in my episode. Again, I didn't do a full episode for this example, but maybe there's a section that's like really the juiciest bit, or maybe there's a question that you want to have the audience who clicks on this video understand and find right off the bat. And honestly, that is where grabbing the clip and clipping it out, different shot. So this is my solo shot on me, and then we jump to our solo shot of John. So right there, maybe we'll clip that out. And again, I'm not going to clip it out entirely. I'm just going to copy it, put it right at the head before we actually hit the opener, so that there's kind of something to entice people, right? And this is usually when I'm in the editing process for an episode. I'll throw in B-roll, I'll throw in all sorts of stuff just to kind of get people engaged for that 30 to 45 seconds, because as most people know, in the first 30 to 45 seconds on YouTube, that is going to be the thing that makes or breaks whether or not people watch the rest of it. So make the hook at the beginning the juiciest part of your episode. And you can trim it down. You don't have to necessarily pull in, a full-blown conversation, but really make it a very tight 30 to 45 seconds. That's, again, the best part of your episode. Or it's a question that you want to kind of lead the audience on and be like, okay, we're going to answer this question. And if you watch the rest of the way through, you're going to get that answer. Okay. So let's look at where we're at currently. Okay. So we're at around 353. Good. We're doing pretty good. We're going to be a little over, but that's okay. I'm okay with that. Okay. I want to make sure we get to some of these questions. So one person asked, how do you do crossfades for your audio? Let me bring that up here. How do you crossfade your audio? So there's a couple different ways. You can absolutely go in and, if we come over to a section right here, let me get rid of this here. If we come into a section right here, you'll see there's little handles. So this is a newer feature inside of Premiere where you can actually stretch out. And of course, because this is the end, you're not going to see it. But if I were to clip this a little bit in this ways, and then ripple delete that, if we zoom in a bit, you'll see that we can actually do kind of crossfades and drag them out that way. And the nice thing about this is that you can kind of change the crossfade itself by going up and down with your mouse. One thing that I do, because I actually use the editing feature or the text editing a lot, I will actually have mapped a default audio transition right at the top here. So if I were to select, say, these, go up to, I think it's sequence, and apply audio transition, it automatically is going to apply for me a transition right at that point. Okay. So that's how I do it. But, just dragging the handles is the way. And this is actually a newer feature that they released relatively recently. But good question. All right. So let's move on to creating some social clips here. Okay. We're going to definitely get to exporting, but I want to save that to the end. Okay. So to create a social clip, what I intend to do is, just like I said before, I will find the best part of the episode, and usually it ends up actually being my hook. That ends up being kind of the thing that I like to use, is the hook. I'll take the hook that's, again, already mapped to be 30 to 45 seconds already. Grab the hook and make it a vertical version. Okay. So how do we do that? Really simple. Okay. So let's find kind of the section we want here. There's John. And then we've got this 2-shot right here. And then we'll kind of, hey, this is a quick test podcast here.
Doing just video here, recorded in OBS Studio. And the way I got things set up here is I'm switching between different shots. So this is my solo shot on me, and then we jump to our solo shot of John. There's John. And then we got this 2-shot right here. And this is all.
Okay. So I'm going to use just this section here. I'm going to use the razor tool, clip it out, and just highlight it. And you can do copy if you want to. And then we'll come over to our vertical version here. Remember, we made that vertical sequence. And we're just going to paste it. Okay. So there is our section there. Now, this is great. And we could absolutely start editing if we want to. But we're going to notice a couple things. Okay. First of all, our framing is not exactly the framing we want for this particular export. You know, I personally hate it when you watch a video on social and it's framed widescreen. Okay, that's not good. It's not going to work out well for you. We want this to be using the format that we want for this vertical execution. So it used to be that you have to go in and like select the clip and go to effects, and then you have to do the scaling. We don't have to do that anymore, and this is really cool. So inside of Premiere, we have a effect called auto reframe, and I use this all the time. And what's nice about this is that even if I move around in the clip, I can still have it stay within frame. Okay. And the way you use the auto reframe effect, it's very simple. I'm going to select all of my clips here and just drag it on. And you're going to see that it's going to analyze the movement. And if we play this back now, hey, this is a quick test podcast here.
Doing just video here, recorded in OBS Studio. And the way I got things set up here is I'm switching between different shots. So this is my solo shot on me, and then we jump to our solo shot of John. There's John. And then we got this 2-shot right here. And this is all.
Hey, now, this is a. Now there's a couple things happening here that we don't really want, right? One, it is kind of moving all over the place, and I did that on purpose because I wanted to show you what this thing does. So it is going to look at the motion of your clip and try to estimate, to try to keep you and honestly track you to keep you kind of in frame. All right. That's what it's doing. But since I built this out to have kind of all of the clips kind of edited together live while I was recording, you know, it can't kind of estimate that motion. So we have to help it out. And that's where we can use another effect here. This actually isn't an effect here. It's actually a process. We can select our clips and choose Scene Edit Detection. So this is really neat because it will go through and find all the moments when our camera split, right? We went to a different shot, and it'll analyze it and then break those out into separate clips. Okay, so we can see right then and there that, hey, it is not moving around as much. And it probably still didn't know what to do with this 2-shot, and I knew that was going to happen too. All right. But let's just mute myself and let's just play it back. You can see now that it's not going to move around once we cut to John and once we cut to the 2-shot, right? It stays kind of still, cuts to John, stays still, and then cuts to me. All right. And that's because we're now applying that auto reframe to each individual clip rather than the entire clip that has all those little edits built in. Okay. So how do we fix this last one here? Because I want to make sure that one's good too. So I'm actually going to duplicate this. And instead of apply auto reframe, I'm going to go the old-fashioned way, and that is by scaling and cropping. Not the most fun thing, but for something like this, it kind of does the job. So for me, I'm going to put myself on top there. We'll scale it up and just kind of drag it so that I'm positioned kind of right there. I'll apply the crop effect and just put that there, and we'll just crop the bottom a bit right there, and we'll repeat the same process with John. We'll just move him down here and scale it up. And the nice thing is, because I'm on top already with the crop, I don't really have to crop him. Okay, so for things like 2-shots, you know, obviously this is something that you know, if you're using Riverside, you know, this sort of social clipping effect can be done really easily. But if you're using Premiere Pro, you know, try to, if you can, keep everyone kind of on their own solo shot, because then it makes the auto reframe process a lot easy. But, you know, if you do have it where you've got a 2-shot, you can Just kind of put one person on top, one person on the bottom, and then have kind of the text in the middle of the way through. Now, we've got kind of the framing done. Let's actually edit this a little bit more because, yeah, it's under 20 seconds. And honestly, this would be a perfectly fine social clip to go out, but I really want to make it really tight. And that's where we can use the text transcript editing. Okay. So for this, we have to unmute our audio. And right then and there, we could see there is our transcript. Now, this is really cool. Okay. So if we play this back.
Hey, this is a quick test podcast here, doing just video here, recorded in OBS Studio. And the way I got things set up here is I'm switching between different shots. So this is my solo shot on me. And then we jump to our solo shot of John. There's John. And then we've got this 2-shot right here. And this is all.
Okay. So not bad. And you could just use this to create captions. And honestly, that's what I'm going to do. But what's nice about this is that I can actually edit using this transcript. Right. So maybe, because this kind of tails off at the end here, it says, and this is all. I don't want that. I want to get rid of that. So I'm just going to highlight it and then use the keyboard shortcut, the quotation mark. So if you hit that, it deletes it. Okay. Right then and there. And we can not only just select portions here, we can search. So if there is a specific word. So maybe, I want to remove maybe the word video for whatever reason. We just type in the search video, and then we can either hit delete here, or again, I can just go, highlight that section there. Actually, let me do that again. Video, and then just delete it. Oh, it has to do it there. And hit delete, and it deletes it that way. I use this, honestly, for deleting filler words. There are a lot of times that I have filler words because I do an hour and a half, sometimes hour and a half long episode. And you can use this little filter function here to select filler words and pauses. So this one doesn't have any filler words, but if we, probably the episode one does. So if we hit filler words, let's see here, and I didn't have, of course, the example didn't have any filler words. But what's neat is that you'll actually see it pop up as filler words, and you can then just hit delete all. Like I'll do it with pauses here. You can see what happens. So if I select all the pauses, you'll see them all pop up. And then instead of just deleting one at a time, I can hit delete and hit delete all, and all of them disappear. Okay, all of them. I did this literally last night with an episode where I took a whole hour and a half long episode, selected all the filler words, and the filler words were like and ah and those sorts of things that you're going to want to delete if you can. Select them all, hit delete, and the transcript editing for filler words is actually pretty good, in my opinion. So doing that eliminates the filler words. You can edit all using this. And for our vertical version, we can really tighten this up. So that's how we use the transcript editing, is just selecting, hitting the parenthesis button, and it'll remove it. Okay. We can also create captions. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to hit the create caption button. And, I want captions kind of to be, in the middle of the video itself. So we can come in here to the captions and we can choose how long we want our captions to be. I like to keep them for social clips at around 11 and use a single line and hit create captions. That's going to create my captions right at the top. And then we can style them. And how do we style them? Using the Essential Graphics panel. This is really cool. So if we come over to the Essential Graphics panel, we can choose our font to make it different. I like to use Mogrt and do black italic and then make it really big, like really big. And then, of course, make the zone in the center, but then adjust it a bit. Like maybe about right there. Okay. And if we play this back, we can see there is our, mute my audio while we're doing this. So we can see there is my captions. Now, obviously, when I get to right here, when I get to my 2-shot, I don't want necessarily the captions to be over John's face. I want it to be in the center. And that's where we can select our captions that pop up right there, and maybe trim this a bit so it's only popping up right there. and then just adjust it. Okay. Let me bring this question up because this kind of applies to the transcript feature. So Jeff asks, does the transcript deletion actually take the words and video out of the actual video? Hope my question makes sense. No, it is. If you're thinking of like Descript, where you can like use AI and it kind of will change the voice itself, it does not do that. What it actually is doing is just taking that section and automatically removing it and doing a ripple delete. That is what it's doing. So again, I use it a lot for filler words. I use it for sections. It's just another way of editing. If you're used to editing a paragraph, it's a lot easier looking at a paragraph than looking at a waveform sometimes, and especially for spoken word stuff like this. So no, it's not gonna you can't change it using AI, at least not yet. If the Adobe people are watching, that would be a cool feature. But yeah, it does take it out of the audio, takes it out of the video, clips it completely out, and then you're good to go. Okay. All right. And I think this kind of applies the same sort of thing here. Is it obvious in the video when you make text cuts? Maybe this is kind of what Jeff is asking. You're talking necessarily about the jump cuts. I mean, it is obvious, but here's the nice thing about video podcasts. It's kind of a style. It's a style to have that, kind of jump cutty type feel to it. It's a weird thing. People like that sort of thing. And I think it's because on YouTube, people are used to that. We've conditioned the audience that, hey, you're going to get a video that has a lot of jump cuts. And honestly, for audio only listeners, it's not really going to be a big deal. As long as you're putting some transitions between those cuts, it's not going to necessarily disrupt it. Good questions. All right. So we've got our social clip done. We've got our captions in. Let's actually focus on the next step, which is exporting. Okay. So exporting is important. We want to make sure we do it right. So let's go up to the export tab here. And actually, no, let's jump first to the episode. Now, there's a couple ways to export. You could export using Media Encoder. If you've never used Media Encoder, that's fine. You can export directly out of Premiere Pro. I like using Media Encoder if I have a lot of things I'm trying to export. If I'm trying to export an episode, maybe a couple clips, and maybe a social clip here, it's easy to do all of that from a third-party program that Adobe has than doing all of those individually. It's, again, going to save you time. But for the sake of this example, I'm going to show you exporting out of Premiere because it's the easiest thing to do. Okay, so we've got our episode here. I want to export this thing out. Let's go up to export, and we've got our export settings. Now, it is worth noting that you can publish directly to YouTube from here. Okay, so you can hit that tag there. You can sign into your YouTube account, and you can connect directly to YouTube from here. I don't do that. Why? Because I like to do it the old-fashioned way because I'm, old. So I like to use the regular export feature here. Now, for video, and this is what we're going to focus on first, is exporting for video. I'm going to change the name of my episode to whatever the title of your episode is going to be. And this is a thing that I found out recently, that YouTube actually does read the title and uses that for SEO purposes. So whatever your title is going to be, maybe add in more than just episode 220. The title of whatever the video is going to be. So this is going to be the ultimate podcast episode. Okay, we're going to call it that for whatever reason. The nice thing about Premiere Pro is that it gives you tons of presets. So if you want to, you can choose a preset right here. I'm actually going to make mine. Let's actually choose one just kind of from the preset here. I like going with match source high bitrate. Okay. That's a nice one to go with because basically it's going to look at whatever your footage was and say, all right, whatever the footage is, I'm going to try to match it. For format, we always want to use H.264. That's an MP4 for you all. That is kind of the default standard. There's a bunch of other formats you can use, but honestly, for getting started, H.264 is great. For video, if you use this source, match source, high bitrate, everything here should be grayed out because, again, it's pulling in from whatever the video source is. Now, for audio, we want to look and make sure that our audio looks good here. We can choose if we want to be stereo or mono. We can choose the sample rate if we want to, and we can choose the bit rate. For audio, I pretty much keep it standard, whatever it is, default, okay, if we're doing a video version. Now, where it gets fun is under effects. And this is worth a solo shot here, okay? Solo shot. This is worth talking about. If you have ever watched a YouTube video or you've listened to a podcast and you've gone, why do I have to crank up the volume so much to be able to hear it? It's because whoever put that video podcast out or whoever put that audio podcast out isn't doing this step, okay? And it is loudness normalization, okay? This is so important because this is going to enable you to make sure that your audio levels are at that standard level for both audio podcasts and video podcasts, okay? It's worth a solo shot talking about. Let's jump over to here. So, under effects, we've got a bunch of effects that we can add. Consider these like post-processing effects. The one we want to do is loudness normalization, okay? Now, you'll get some scary things that pop up here of what is the standard you're going to use. And all we're basically saying is that we want to set the audio to a standard level. That's it. Now, you can use the ATSC one here. I don't use that because I can't change this target loudness section here. The one that I use and what I suggest you all use is ITU BS 177-3. And the reason I choose this one is because I can then come into here and change my target loudness. So if you're a podcaster, you're familiar with the idea of LUFS, right? Spotify might want -16 or -14. Apple Podcasts might want a different one. So this is where you can set that LUF amount, okay? So I'm going to set it because this is just what I do. I like -16. You do you. Whatever level you like, you use that. But -16 works for me. Tolerance, I'll keep what it is. Max true peak. This is what the loudest decibel level your waveform is going to be. So if you want it going right up against like -1, have it change this to -1. If you want to be a little bit quieter and go down to -3, you can make it -3. I like kind of hitting the middle of -2. That's just me. And all this loudness normalization it's basically a limiter. That's all it's doing. It's looking at your audio with everything combined. And because we did some stuff with Essential Sound where we leveled everything out to that -23 already, it's just adding a little bit of boost to get it up to that proper loudness across the entire video and audio file. So this is great. We don't need to do anything else with this. And let's just hit export. I'm going to export this to just the desktop. Again, don't do this, but save it somewhere that isn't your desktop, and we'll hit export. Okay, it's going to run through its whole process and spit out an MP4 that is useful for your YouTube or wherever you're going to send it. And there it's done. Okay, obviously an hour-long podcast is going to take a little bit more time. Okay, for audio, same process, but this time, instead of format H.264, we're going to just jump down to MP3. Yes, you can export MP3 straight out of Premiere Pro. Okay. And what's nice about this is that you can, again, choose, all right, we're doing stereo or mono. Are we choosing an audio bit rate? Do we want 96? Do we want 128? Obviously, these sort of settings here are going to affect whether or not you have a large file size or a small file size. But again, we have the effect, loudness normalization, ITU, -16 LUFS. Boom. Right there. Okay. So we can now hit export again. It's going to export out my MP3. And now I can upload that to Libsyn. Okay. Very, very simple. If we want our vertical video, there's one feature we do need to do. Same export process as our video. The big difference, though, and this is important, is that if you export, sometimes you'll see where it says frame size, and this is really for vertical video only, where the frame size is 1280 by 720. Now, when you export this, you're going to get these black pillars on the side. We don't want that. So it's really important with any sort of not standard video framing that you hit the match source, because that is going to kind of crimp it and crop it automatically to that really nice vertical video that we want. Okay. So we hit match source. That's great. With captions, we want to choose burn in. Okay. That is going to take our captions we created and burn those into the video and make them permanent. Okay. If you created captions for YouTube, you could conversely choose the create sidecar file. This will create an SRT file that you could upload to YouTube as well. Okay. And that is honestly how we use Premiere Pro. Okay. Now, I know we got questions and I want to get to them. And we are definitely over on time. I knew that was going to be the case, but I want to make sure we get to some of these. So let's answer a couple of these questions here. And let's start with a couple of these. So, first of all, Carlos says, what are good strats to hide jump cuts when cutting out unwanted audio? Okay, there are a couple of different ways. So you could keep it in there. Like, that's the truth, is you can keep in those jump cuts, as I said, because that is a style that a lot of YouTubers are kind of used to, right? Like, they're used to that jump cutty style thing. Outside of that, if you really want to, you could use B-roll. And that's what I've done in the past, is I've used B-roll to actually hide some of those cuts. And I really only use B-roll for the hook part, right? Because I want that to be the most visually interesting and that's going to grab people the most, right? But throughout the whole episode, you can absolutely, add in B-roll to hide those things. There's also an effect inside of Premiere called the morph cut, which for talking head things like what I'm doing right now, you could use that to kind of hide the cuts, but I wouldn't obsess over it, honestly. If you watch a YouTube video and you'll see how many, jump cuts there are, but good question. All right, so let's see what we got here. So let's bring this up here. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being major, if I have a lot of experience in video editing in Premiere Pro and Libsyn, how useful will this be for an experienced editor and host? So I'm going to tell you right now, I'm an experienced video editor myself. Editing a podcast is different from editing a video of any kind, right? Because there are considerations you have to consider for longer form content. Okay, so that is what I would go with. I never used to use the essential sound because I was like, well, I'm going to just go use Audition. But again, the point of all of this is speed. We want to get our video episodes out as fast as possible. We don't want it to drag us down, because if we drag us down, we're more liable to not want to do video, right? And that's my point of having this discussion, is to kind of make it easy for you. But good question there. All right, let's see if we got any more here. So, okay. All right, let's bring this one up here. So Our Catholic Prayer says, can I edit sound in Premiere Pro as well as with Audition and sync the audio to editing and video? I've been using Adobe Audition with Libsyn for several years now, and it's been good. You can do whatever workflow works best for you. And honestly, I used to do that exact workflow. I would take in my individual audio tracks, do all of my audio post-processing in Audition, bring them into Premiere Pro, and then sync them, using the synchronize feature in Premiere Pro. But there's no perfect way. There is only your way. What has worked well for you for years, you continue doing that. My hope is that, this gives you maybe some ideas for dealing with maybe those problems that maybe you're like, man, this takes so much time out of my process that I'm hesitant to do video. And that's, again, my point is, you take something away from here that you can add to your own personal process. Okay, but good question. All right. Let's see what else we got here. All right, so this question here, Premiere Pro Beta can edit via transfer. I'd like to know if I can make a cut via transcript editor. Then will Premiere insert a crossfade between the edits in the same way that Descript does? As far as I know right now, it can't do that. Okay. As far as I know, I have not played around with the Premiere Pro Beta. That's just me. I haven't used it yet, but I would hope that's something that they could think up, and that's the nice thing about having Descript, is that Premiere looks at it and goes, well, not Premiere, but Adobe looks and goes like, well, we got to try to copy some things over from them, right? That's kind of how they work. What I tend to do is, again, I will use the transcript editing feature the same way that you're doing it, and I will then just select everything and add a default transition that is really short, like really, really tiny, like maybe like 0.5 seconds. And that's the transition between my clips. All right. It's not perfect, but it's I'd say about 95% of the way there. But as far as I know right now, there is no auto crossfade feature. Good question. All right. I think I answered this before, but I just want to make sure we get to it. Can I add VST plugins within Premiere Pro to do noise removal or other sound treatments? You can. It depends on the VST plugin. I know that, I recently added in from Boris Effects a called Pop Remover. It's something you can add in. It all depends on how you're importing it. Most VST plugins are supported by Premiere Pro, so you should be fine. It just depends on that particular plugin. Okay. Can I record video directly into Premiere Pro, or do I need to import video from another program or app? So I know that you can record audio in Premiere Pro. I have never tried it with video. I'm not 100% sure if that's possible. Premiere Pro is designed for post-production. So you're using a tool like Riverside, or you're using a tool like StreamYard, or maybe OBS Studio or Ecamm, and you're doing the recording with that particular tool. And then what we're doing in Premiere Pro is we're really just refining and post-processing our audio and video. We're cutting it together. We're kind of joining those parts together. That's really what Premiere Pro does. Okay. I hope that answers your question there. Okay, let's see here. Does adding all of our recording video and audio elements, theme music, create new copies of these files each time you make a new episode? That can take up a lot of space. You are absolutely right. That can take up a lot of space. As far as I know, it doesn't, because it is still referencing those original files, right? Still referencing that. That's the thing to keep in mind, is that if I were to take this, template file, right, and share it with, say, my co-host or an editor or whoever, they will need access to those original files. So you're not making copies. It is just creating references to those original files. But if those original files aren't there, it will be like, I don't know what to do. And you'll get the big red, like, hey, media offline screen. That's not fun. Okay. But no, it's not going to create by default copies like that. But it is something where you need those original files to reference. Good question. We answered the question about crossfades there. Okay, this is a good one here. Can you import custom fonts? Absolutely, you can. If you bring in system fonts, if you have you go to defont.com and you download a font there, you can absolutely bring those fonts in because they're part of your system. So if we were to go over, let me just jump over to the screen here, and we were to select our captions, I've got access to all of my system fonts right here. And you also can add in Adobe fonts and have access to those as well. So you can absolutely bring in whatever fonts you'd like. Good question. Okay. Are there any other questions? We're coming up around 3:30 right here. And I just want to make sure that everyone's questions has been asked. I think we're good. Oh, this was the one I missed. I wanted to make sure we talked about this one here. So Carlos mentioned, for multi-camera editing, what is a good rhythm? 3 camera angles. I didn't talk about multi-camera editing, and that's because we've already talked about it. There's a Premiere Pro video that I made, I think it might have been a year ago, that talked about a multicam editing workflow. Now, in terms of switching cameras, I'm of a mind that you don't want to go too much and kind of make it too fast, because keep in mind that it's still a long form spoken word type of episode, right? But I like to go with, if I'm feeling the rhythm where someone is talking about something and it's important, then you switch to a solo shot. And then maybe you direct it where you come back to a 2-shot or whatever, maybe a kind of a wider shot if we're getting to the end of a topic and we want to transition to, say, a new topic. I like to start wide, go in close to whatever the point is that I want to drive home to my audience, and then come back. So there's no really set rhythm. It depends on kind of the rhythm of the conversation, but I hope that helps. And definitely check out the Premiere Pro video, and I think we're going to link it here in the description or in the chat too, of how to actually use multi-camera, because that's a whole other beast, which, it's kind of nuts. But yeah, multi-camera can definitely be done in Premiere Pro. On top of that, I want to make mention of this. If you have multiple layers of video, mainly you have those multiple cameras, you can use AI tools that are third party. If you've never heard of Time Bolt or Autopod, seriously look at those, because those actually will allow you to use your audio as a guide to cut between your different cameras. I don't have Autopod where I'd show you it, but I wanted to make sure this was simplified for those just starting. But Autopod is definitely a third party that I would look at using. It's a plugin that works with Premiere Pro, and you can use that AI to kind of do some of this cutting for you. Okay. I think that might have been all of our questions. If there are any that I missed, please let me know. Okay. I think we got all of them. Any final questions? Final call for questions before we come to 3:30. I know this went a little bit long, but we had a lot of stuff to talk about. Going once, going twice? No? Alrighty, cool. So with that said, be sure, if you haven't done so already, hit the follow button, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button on the YouTube channel. That helps us out a lot. And honestly, we are putting out content left and right. You don't want to miss it. If you want to catch more of these live streams, do me a favor and go to the Luma page for Libsyn, subscribe to it so you never miss a live. And with that said, my name is Brian Coddington. It's been great talking to you all. I hope this has helped you out in your video podcasting journey. And with that said, we will see you next time.